Have you ever noticed that dealing with money feels, well, less like a math problem and more like a therapy session? That's exactly the big idea behind Morgan Housel's incredible book, The Psychology of Money. It basically says what's going on in your head is way, way more important than what's on a spreadsheet. So today, we're going to break down the key lessons that have totally changed how people think about building wealth. Let's jump in.
Okay, so the book kicks off with this huge, nagging question. We all know people who are just brilliant, right? Doctors, engineers, lawyers, total geniuses in their field. And yet, they make these completely baffling mistakes with their money, one after another. So if they're so smart, why is that? What is going on? And boom, Hauser just hands us the answer right there on a silver platter. This is the whole point of the book. It's not about how many formulas you know. It's about how you act. Turns out, financial success is a soft skill. How you handle your own behavior is just way more important than how big your brain is. This one idea, it's the foundation for everything else we're about to get into. So, okay, if it's not about being a genius, then what really drives financial outcomes? Well, Housel pulls back the curtain on these huge, invisible forces that are always pushing and pulling on our financial lives, whether we see them or not. We're going to start with three big ones: luck, risk, and greed. To really show how big a role luck and risk play, Housel tells this amazing story. So think about Bill Gates. Obviously, a genius, no question. But he also had this incredible, one-in-a-million stroke of good luck. He went to one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer back in 1968. Now, at that same school was his friend Ken Evans, who was just as brilliant and just as obsessed with computers. But he got hit by the awful flip side of chance, a totally random, tragic risk. He died in a mountaineering accident before he ever graduated. Same genius, different luck. And the lesson here is huge. When we succeed, we have to admit that luck probably played a part. It keeps us humble. But when we see other people fail, we have to remember that unseen risks might have just swamped them. It's a really powerful reminder to have some compassion, because things are never quite as good or as bad as they look on the surface. Okay, so luck and risk are these big external forces. But Housel says there's an internal force that's just as powerful and maybe even more dangerous. And it's something that often grows right out of success: good old-fashioned greed. You just have to look at the story of the hedge fund manager Raj Rajaratnam. I mean, by any and every measure, the guy was a massive success. He had millions, more money than he could ever possibly need or spend. He had it all. And yet, he risked everything: his career, his reputation, his freedom, all of it, by getting into insider trading just to make more money that he didn't even need. It's his classic trap of moving the goalposts, where success just fuels more ambition and the feeling of enough is always just a little bit further away. It's a really chilling cautionary tale about when the desire for more goes way too far. So, if greed is what destroys wealth, what's the most powerful force for creating it? Housel says it's another one of these unseen powers, but this one is our friend. And honestly, it's probably the most powerful force in all of finance. It's called compounding. And this timeline of Warren Buffett's wealth just says it all. Look, we all know Buffett is a great investor, but his real secret weapon isn't some crazy genius for picking stocks. It's time. Just look at these numbers. Almost all of his massive fortune was earned after his 65th birthday. His skill was being a pretty good investor. But his superpower? His superpower was being a pretty good investor for over 75 years, just letting that money work its magic. And that right there is one of the biggest lessons in the whole book. We are all wired to chase those fast, crazy, explosive returns. But real wealth, the kind that lasts for generations, it's not built like that. It's built by being consistent and being patient and just letting the quiet magic of compounding do its thing over decades, not days. Now, this brings us to this really interesting kind of counterintuitive idea, something that really flips our whole modern culture on its head. If the real goal is this long-term, slow-burn wealth, then what does that actually look like in real life? Housel says we're constantly getting confused between being rich and being wealthy, and they are not at all the same thing. And here it is. This is the definition that matters. Wealth isn't the fancy car. It's not the designer watch. That's just evidence that you spent money. True wealth is the money you haven't spent. It's the assets you don't see, working for you in the background, buying you something that no luxury good ever could. This chart just breaks it down perfectly. Being rich is loud. It's visible. It's about showing off a high income right now. But being wealthy, that's silent. It's invisible. It's the fancy car you didn't buy. It's the first-class upgrade you passed on. It's having financial security in the background that gives you options and flexibility and real control over your own life. And that's exactly why Housel argues that your savings rate is actually more important than your investment returns. I mean, think about it. You can't control what the stock market does next year. It's totally out of your hands. But you have 100% control over how much you save. And what you're really buying with those savings isn't just a number in an account. You're buying freedom. You're buying control over your own time, the ability to switch to a job you love, or handle an emergency without panicking, or retire when you decide to. Now that is the real return on your money. All right, let's pull all these threads together. We've talked about these invisible forces like luck and greed, the amazing, quiet power of time, and the real meaning of wealth. And what you start to see is that they all point back to one single, simple, unifying idea. Housel makes this really beautiful and empathetic point, which is that no one is crazy. When you see someone making a money decision that looks totally insane to you, just remember, they've lived a different life. Someone who grew up poor during a recession is going to see risk completely differently than a tech worker who only saw bull markets. Their choices make perfect sense when you see it through the lens of their own life story. And that really is what makes this book so different from all the other finance books out there. See, it's not another textbook full of charts and formulas and stock picks. It's not trying to tell you exactly what to do. Instead, it uses these timeless stories about human nature to change how you think about money. It focuses on our emotions, our mindset, our behavior, the stuff that actually determines if we succeed or fail. And so here we are, right back where we started. The single most important skill in finance has absolutely nothing to do with math. It's about having a little humility, controlling your greed, being patient, and figuring out what enough really means to you. It all comes down to behavior. So I guess that just leaves us with one last thing to think about. The goal here isn't to suddenly become a financial whiz overnight. It's just about making small, consistent changes in how we behave with money. So after hearing all this, what's the one behavior, the one little thing you can change, starting today, that could make all the difference for your future?